Hello. We're going to try the mic again. Hopefully it'll work this time. But hey, let me just put on Discord that I'm live. Dummy. I need to put the hey everyone. Hey. Everyone. Okay, there we go. Hey, what's up, Miss Frizz? Yay, mic's working. We'll see how long it lasts. I tried plugging it in a slightly different way, but hopefully I will have new equipment starting next stream. We'll see. But yes, so fingers crossed it stays cooperative. I don't know what happened last time. That was just weird. But hi, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Today we're going to talk about clean energy misconceptions. Because boy, there's a lot of them, and I feel like I've heard them all at this point. So we're going to talk about that because I thought that would be fun. So if you aren't on Discord and you would like to be, this is a reminder to go onto Discord because there's a couple of interesting points that were raised on there that might provide a little bit of context. Let me put the link in. I need to do the r/whatevers, but I don't have that at the moment, so I'm doing this. Because there was a paragraph written by one of our chatters that has a whole bunch of information that we could dive into, potentially kind of like interesting stuff. Hey, there you are. That was fast. Thanks. Okay, so I was thinking we can kind of go through what they said and go through different points that they brought up. We can also, I created a list of different clean energy misconceptions that we can go over. So, and then I also have a PragerU video lined up that we can critique. So there's many different opportunities. I'm not sure which one I want to jump into first. There's just so much. Probably should prep more, but it's fine. Okay, let's see. Let's start with the PragerU video, just because I think it's easier to just kind of start with a video and critique it there. Just gave it a quick, yeah, pretty interesting, right? So I feel like a lot of the things that they talked about there also is on the PragerU video that I've watched before, but there's a lot of interesting misconceptions for sure on there. Some are easier to counter than others. Some of them obviously are just kind of opinions and don't necessarily need to be countered, but it's good to keep in mind. Let's just go over that first. Let's go over that. I'm not sure if they're in the chat yet, but let's just start by going over each sentence because I think it's very interesting. And I think that what they said was very realistic to how a lot of people think. That might not be from California, I guess, because California was brought up a couple times. Clean energy is fronted largely by left-wing big tech types who don't understand the realities of day-to-day Americans and are only doing it because they are scared, not because it's in our interests. So that's a very interesting start. So when we talk about clean energy, it could be easy for people to think of like the corporation's perspective or the government's perspective and not think of the worker's perspective when it comes to the transition, right? And so I think it's interesting because when we are talking about clean energy, when activists are talking about clean energy, and they don't necessarily have anyone in the field that is going to end up having to change jobs or something like that, it can be easy for us to look at it from a big picture perspective and not think about the workers. And I think that people who are in the front lines of this transition get the impression that environmentalists don't think about the workers, which it's not always true. And policies can reflect that that's not necessarily true because when we go into again, the Inflation Reduction Act, which I keep going to it because it's the largest climate bill passed in the U.S. There is some stuff there for specifically. I'm breaking up. Oh, if it's my video breaking up, unfortunately that's normal. If it's my audio breaking up, that's a problem. Yeah, I'm working on a Mac, so sorry about that. But hello, Edard. As someone whose husband used to be a roughneck, I would much rather him work in clean energy. My husband can speak firsthand to rig fires and explosions. Yes, and I think that's an argument, or not an argument, but I think that's an aspect to the work change that is not emphasized enough, which is what workers can benefit from. I think it's both. Miss Frizz, is my audio breaking up too? Let me know. I think it's a misconception that where was I going with this? Sorry, this threw me off. The audio is better now. That's good. Thank you. I think we need to talk more about the health implications of clean energy compared with fossil fuels. And that's not even like a misconception because, I mean, people have talked about how wind energy hurts your health, which is not true. So we could start there with like misconceptions about people's health when it comes to clean energy. But when we're talking about it in comparison with black lung disease okay, good. Thank you. When we're talking about it in perspective of things like black lung disease, or we're talking about casualties from fires and explosions and stuff, for some reason, people forget that fossil fuels also explode. Like they can talk sometimes about like battery fires and stuff like that, which is legit and is a problem. But also, if you catch a gas car on fire, it also is going to go up in flames. So it's kind of an interesting double standard. The H2S exposure alone. Interesting. Here, I want to look that up actually. H2S exposure. What are the symptoms to that? Let's take a look. Let me go on to Safari. Nope, yep, there's PragerU. Okay. So that's hydrogen sulfide, and it can cause irritation to the eyes and the respiratory system. It can cause apnea, a coma, convulsions, dizziness, headache, weakness, irritability, insomnia, stomach upset, and if liquid, frostbite. That's interesting. It's why they wear the yellow monitors. Nothing, then you die. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, so there's an example of a health impact. Honestly, I feel like we can, yeah, go ahead. Hit me with other health impacts of working with fossil fuels, like honestly. Of oil refineries, maybe? Yep, sulfur dioxide. Asthma is very common in areas around fossil fuel production. So that's one. Yeah, there was a whole incident happening near Jordan, how there was like a lot of adverse impacts. And for a while, the government was kind of ignoring that. And then different journalists went in and they're like, nope, people here have cancer like twice the rate of normal. And they're like, oh yeah, that's true. Living near an oil refinery ups your risk of stroke. There was also a recent study that showed that air pollution has caused 1 million stillbirths around the world each year. So that's another health implication. These are things we're not even talking about climate change here. We're just talking about how our current way of energy production is just not healthy for people living near the facility, much less the environment too. And then, that's where people then counter and they go, oh, well, critical mineral mining is also really bad for your health. And that's also true too, right? We have instances of kids working in mines and getting heavy metal disease in their lungs. And that's also really bad, obviously. And then there's also the other side of it where it's like if we don't have any recycling programs or anything like that, then the waste from clean energy can also be bad for the environment and potentially human health if there's any exposure to bad chemicals as the decomposition process happens. But this stuff does not happen during the lifespan of these clean energy products. It's the beginning part and it's the end part that we have some things we got to work on when it comes to clean energy. With fossil fuels, every single part of it has a health and environmental impact. And so I think that's important to remember. Exposure to fracking chemicals and radiation, that's true too for people that are concerned about radiation from like nuclear plants. You also have to think about radiation from fossil fuels too. Fossil fuels also has radiation fracking. Yeah, the levels of radiation in hydraulic fracturing wastewater has been measured to be as high as 18,035 PCIL, thousands of times the maximum allowed by the federal standard for drinking water, and there are concerns about radiation exposure during these spills and blowouts. Here, let's go on to the NRDC about fracking. Studies have found that the fracking boom has resulted in dangerous levels of toxic air pollution, and pollution from fracking sites is suspected of contaminating drinking water in Colorado, Pennsylvania, and several other states. I'm sure that Levelhead, who's from Colorado, can confirm this. He covers a lot of fracking sites, by the way, if you don't know who Levelhead is. Cool other Twitch stream you should definitely check out for news. NRDC is fighting to protect people and from public health of unchecked fracking. We call on the state and federal. Okay, cool. Fracking has released a toxic slew of air pollution that includes chemicals that can cause severe headaches, asthma symptoms, childhood leukemia, cardiac problems, and birth defects. In addition, many of the 1,000+ chemicals used in fracking are harmful to human health. Some are known to cause cancer. So there's some other health impacts. So when we're talking about like saying that environmentalists don't care about the workers downstream, maybe we just don't talk enough about the potential health impacts or the health implications of switching to clean energy, the good health implications of switching to clean energy. Because as you said, Miss Friz, you rather have your husband working in clean energy than near a rig, because there's just more health implications and there's just more risk associated with those areas. And again, as we talked about previously, it's not like these workers are no longer going to be hands-on and we're strapping them to a computer monitor or anything like that. They're still able to live their best blue-collar lives, but they're able to do that with less health implications, which is important. I just put an announcement in his perfect. Yeah, I love Levelhead. He's great. So that's we kind of got off track from what the original thing was, which is clean energy is fronted largely by left-wing big tech types who don't understand the realities of day-to-day Americans and are doing it because they are scared, not because of our interests, which is interesting. Yeah, I used to be a frack operator. Interesting. Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I didn't know that. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, so there you go. You get firsthand people who have been in that industry who are like, ugh, the industry has problems, right? And I think another thing too also is just that the idea that it's fronted largely by left-wing big tech types. First of all, left-wing and big tech types are not the same thing. So let's start there, right? Because neoliberalism and progressivism is not the same thing. But also we do see, oh, your husband. Oh, okay. Sorry. You put level head in there. I thought that was him for a sec. I was like, really? That did not know that. Yes. Okay. So frac operator. So you really have firsthand, and that's supposed to be the cleaner form of energy out of fossil fuels too. That's another thing too, is that we hear arguments of, oh, well, we're moving away from coal and oil. We're moving more towards gas, and gas is better for everyone. And it's like, actually, there was just less research. And now that we have more research, we're finding, no, it's not. It's really not. Yeah, exactly. A lot of lefties hate big tech. That's a misconception for conservatives and leftists. I think they would get along more if they just banded together against tech giants and corrupt politicians. You know what I mean? Like, we all have the same freaking problem. Exactly. Fracking clean, that's a good one. That's funny. You funny. Hey, what's up, Maple Leaf Dragon? Thank you for the biddies. Here's for 22 minutes. Thank you. I appreciate you. Welcome. We're talking about the health implications of fossil fuels right now. So let's also talk about how clean energy is not just taking a hold in more blue states. It's taking a hold also in a lot of red states too. Let's see, which are the top states for solar? Let's see, which states are the top states for growing solar, for the growing solar industry. Okay, so we have California, unsurprising. There's a lot of sun there. Oh, but look at that second one and the third one. Wow, and the fourth one, the fifth one. Interesting. Seventh one. It seems here, just from this picture, I don't know, that it's not only taking hold in blue states. Strange how that works. It also seems like it might be taking hold in some red states too. Yeah, solar is everywhere in Texas. And while the winter freeze, I did a whole video on onshore wind and how Texas was blaming it for the winter blackout, right? Which is silly because, first of all, you have way more fossil fuels on the grid than you do have wind. So let's not blame the lesser of the energy producers. 2, wind turbines exist in the Arctic. So saying that wind turbines just don't exist when it's cold is really dumb because that's just not true. You just did not put in the effort to add a defroster to your wind turbine because you're in Texas, which is understandable. Mistakes happen. But also, now that you understand the weather is a little more crazy than it used to be, you need to prepare for both extremes a little more than you used to, right? Taking hold in desert states. Exactly. It's taking hold in desert states. Which just makes sense. Because here's the thing about clean energy that a lot of people that don't have as much of an understanding about clean energy don't realize, is that when we're moving towards clean energy, we're moving towards the idea that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution for everything. I feel like humanity is learning that about a lot of things. We're learning that there's not necessarily a binary for things. We're learning that, some situations work better for others, and so we shouldn't just generalize things, right? That's a general understanding that we're getting for a lot of areas of our understanding, but energy is one of them. Not just because they are in Texas, they are cheap and wait alternatives to fail. Yes, exactly. So, but when there was the recent almost energy crisis in Texas this last time, which I believe was during the summer, one of the reasons why there wasn't a major blackout again is because there was more clean energy on the grid. Same thing happened with California too. So, let me see if I could find that. Wow, new laws spur clean energy and help Texas power grid. That is 5 days ago. That's interesting. Yeah, here we go. Well, this is CNN, so obviously it's not, it's a little biased, right? But let's see what they say. By the way, fun fact, so I'm going to release a climate recap at the end of the day, which will probably be like tomorrow for some of y'all because it'll be like midnight or whatever. One of my sources, y'all aren't going to believe this. One of my sources is Fox News. They had a good fucking article. I'm shocked. But I actually put Fox News in my source list. And it did hurt a little bit to put it in there. Yeah, we had a lot of rolling brownouts again. Yeah, it's still going to happen, especially when you're not going to be willing to combine your grid with any of the other grids around for extra support. When Texas starts deploying VPPs, they will be truly self-sufficient. True. And also with like battery storage and that kind of thing, that's just going to make things way more reliable. I think it is totally reasonable for people to recognize that there is a influx of clean energy coming through at certain points of the day and not so much in other points of the day, and those don't always add up with the peak demand. And I think that is a very reasonable argument for people to have against clean energy. But we have to keep in mind how long has fossil fuels existed versus how long clean energy has been prioritized. And when you look at those two different things, that's not a same argument, right? You can't claim that we've given enough of a try to clean energy as we have to fossil fuels, nor can we claim we've provided the same amount of support financially for both of those technologies, because fossil fuels are still subsidized way more than clean energy is. I'm actually really lucky. Now I am in Louisiana's grid, but we still have similar issues. Interesting. Okay. That's very interesting, actually. Yeah, well, Louisiana is still a huge fossil fuel heavy state. And every time they're hit by extreme weather events, they are going to have their grid impacted until they bury power lines and prioritize clean energy and basically become what that one city in Florida is, the one that Babcock Ranch that survived Hurricane Ian when everything around it went completely kaput. But that's only going to happen if people are given adequate funding for it, right? We can't expect household, like homeowners, to pay for that, especially since lower income folks are less likely to be able to live in a more energy efficient or solar run home. You know, it's not reasonable to make them do that. There's a weird cutout of Texas that's on the, I did not know that. That's really interesting. They were just like, nope, we're not doing this. If we draw down the fossil fuel subsidies, renewables become the only sane solution. It's true, especially for coal. Coal is only sticking around because it pays off politicians like Manchin to do so. It realistically in the free market should not exist. And that's the most ironic thing about any conservative talking about clean energy, stating that it is still not the financially feasible option. They're just actually not listening to the facts, which is wonderful that we can make up our own facts at this point. It's great. It's fun. So this was during the summer. This is in June. I remember this happening. Texas are cranking on the air conditioning this weekend amid an unusually early heat wave, setting new records for electricity demand in the state, which surpasses 75 gigawatts on Sunday and smashed the 2019 record. Texas grid operator ERCOT's projects projects it could approach that peak again on Tuesday. But unlike the previous extreme weather events in Texas, which led to deadly blackouts, the grid is holding up remarkably well this week. Several experts told CNN that it's owed in large part to a strong performance from wind and solar, which generated 27 gigawatts of electricity during Sunday's peak demand, close to 40% of the total needed. Texas is, by rhetoric, anti-renewables, but frankly, renewables are bailing us out, said Michael Weber, an energy expert and professor at the University of Texas in Austin. They're rocking. That's really spared us a lot of heartache and a lot of money. Despite the Texas Republican rhetoric that wind and solar are unreliable, Texas is has a massive and growing fleet of renewables. Zero carbon electricity sources, wind, solar, and nuclear, powered about 38% of the state's power in 2021, rivaling natural gas at 42%. That is getting kind of close there. This is relatively recent phenomenon for the state. Coal should only be used for steel production, at least until we can start scaling up the Swedish steel solution. I entirely agree with you. And see, this is another example of when people argue, oh, well, we can't move away from fossil fuels because of da-da-da-da-da. Okay, there might be some reasonable reasons why we need to refill our gas reserve just in case, or we need to have that one fossil fuel plant there for that reason. Okay. We can have a conversation about that, right? But then to add on to that argument, oh, that means we need to invest significantly more in new infrastructure. That's not the same thing. Those are not the same arguments, and you can't act like those together make up the same argument, because they don't. Nuance matters. Nuance matters. And it recognizing that every place is different is important. Which is why it's important for states and local communities to be the ones leading this movement. While federal funding is extremely important, and we need to open up that funding for these opportunities, the federal funding does not equate to some government overhaul. Like, for example, people are also equating communism and clean energy together, right? And they say that, oh, if we allow for the government to move towards clean energy, then they're just going to use it as an excuse to expand their power. And that's not true, because all the funding from the Inflation Reduction Act has to be inputted by states. They are given the money and given parameters in which to use the money, but they still have a say over where the money gets used, how much of the money gets used for each project, and oftentimes whether or not it gets used for solar or wind, and something in that aspect too, right? So it's not the same thing as a full government overhaul or whatever. Hey, what's up, Cosmic Seekin? How's it going? February is our coldest month. That doesn't surprise me. It's like a late summer and a late winter kind of thing. Yeah, so we're talking about how Texas has benefited from clean energy. And I know this is a CNN argument, which Texans would not like me using, but I'm sorry, they have some decent sources, like an energy expert and professor at University of Texas at Austin. It's a reasonable source. Wind and solar would not have been available in years in the past, so the growing capacity helps to alleviate reliance on natural gas and coal, said Jonathan DeVibis, operations research analyst and the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Not only have renewables helped keep the power on during the scorching and early heat waves, they have also helped keep costs low. Prices for natural gas and coal are high amid a worldwide energy crunch, but renewables powered by wind and sun have no fuel cost. Crazy how that works. Quote, because the price of wind and sunlight hasn't doubled in the past year like other resources, they're acting as a hedge against high fuel prices, which is why people with electric vehicles are flourishing right now, which is also, more of a privilege to have at this moment, because EVs are not cheap, and that's important to recognize. Texas and other states have been sweltering in triple-digit temperatures and are dangerous heat indices. Why can't I pronounce it? It's like the plural of indexes, right? Or indices. Sorry. Texas state climatologist John Nelson Graham told CNN that San Antonio has been a particularly hot spot, which recently hit 102.5 degrees Fahrenheit, setting a new pre-July record, which is crazy. So, but anyways, so this is an example of wind and solar actually helping the grid. That also occurred in California too, when it experienced a heat wave in the summer as well. So equal opportunity for both places. O&G seriously throw away so much money. Yeah, seriously. It's really dumb. EVs will be cheap going forward, though. True. And actually, if you look at the overall lifetime cost of the vehicle, they already actually are comparable with gas-powered cars. But a lot of people are not able to have the privilege of looking at the overall cost versus the initial sticker shock, which is completely understandable. But if you do look at how much people have to pay to charge their car versus the asking price, it does pay itself off after a while. I want an EV too. In indices, thank you. Yeah, I want an EV really bad. I really want that Volkswagen Buzz, you know, the one that's like a hippie van. But I'm kind of mad at Volkswagen right now because they're slacking when it comes to clean energy priorities. So Toyota and Volkswagen are my two favorites, and they're both slacking, and I'm very upset. The UK government has announced that vehicle taxes will start being charged on electric vehicles from next year. Dang it. Yeah. Well, there was going to be subsidies for cars, but they have to be made in America, and we don't have the infrastructure to make batteries in the US yet. And then also there was that whole issue with France and France, US. Was it just EVs, or I think it was just EVs. Yeah, here it is. France urges U.S. to change Made in America electric car policy. I understand allies, but this stuff annoys me just because, like, you should be supporting your own domestic economy first, in my opinion. And so, like, I'm not sure why alliances have to come in between that. But, I mean, I need to look at Hyundai. My Hyundai is very good to me. Hyundai is another company that's slacking on electric vehicles right now. A lot of good companies are. Ironically, General Motors and Ford are like doing the best, which is funny because General Motors was the original company that destroyed the electric car way back in the 90s. So great that they're pulling out the technology again for us now and looking all great. Wonderful. That'd be like Coca-Cola killing it in the recycling industry, which they're not, but it's like that. There's a bunch of battery plants going online in the US starting in 2024. True. So actually that's a good thing to check too. There's another misconception that all this new stuff is going to take place on the East and West Coast, and that's not true. Actually, there's the whole battery belt, right? By the way, if anyone's interested in the solar-powered EVs, the Lightyear, I think it's a Dutch company, they just also announced a solar-power EV, which is kind of cool. So here we go. This is where the new battery facilities are going to be located. In the Midwest. Michigan's killing it, in particular. The UK will ban all IC-powered vehicle sales from 2030. I thought it was 2035. 2030? I thought it was 2035, but 2030 is better. That's even more ambitious than California then, so that's pretty big. But whenever someone says like, oh, only the coastal states are getting any clean energy jobs, like, nope. Please get something other than Tesla. I know, seriously though. Like, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if more have been announced since this chart came out, because this was in October. Actually, it's pretty recent, but I kind of feel like there might be something more that came out already since then. But yeah, it only has that one operational facility. It doesn't have any new gigafactories announced in Texas, it looks like, which is interesting. So, they become a stan of Elon, and that's what happens. Stellantis and LG building in Canada too. Yeah. Does this one show Canada? Yeah, I know that Ontario is getting a lot as well, which kind of just continues the whole belt, right? Yeah, they're getting a lot of stuff. Stellantis is doing really good at prioritizing new factories, which is cool. I think I see 2 in this graph here, which is, yeah. So they're just building right along there. And it's just because it totally makes sense, because there's already that workforce in that area, and there's already the transporting infrastructure in place for products to be built in those locations. So it just kind of continues with the natural economic situation that we have going on in the U.S. too. Clean energy is not necessarily changing where things are made. Things are still going to be made in the same areas. It's just going to be different things. Ontario and Quebec. Yeah. Even despite all the tax breaks, most businesses aren't coming here because of other laws. I wonder what those other laws are. It could be another reason why Florida doesn't seem to have any business over there either. Strange. So, I mean, if that's considered leftist because they care about human rights. Let's go back to workforce near an airport for execs near major shipping centers. The infrastructure is already there. Exactly. And also with the Mississippi River providing some opportunities for exporting different places, as long, of course, as there's not a huge drought going on in Louisiana, or not Louisiana, but like in the Mississippi River, which there is. Tesla might be building a gigafactory in Montreal too, still negotiating. Interesting. Thank you for being my Canadian correspondent. I appreciate you. I have my Canadian and Texan correspondents here. So yes, I think we've established that clean energy is not only fronted by left-wing or big tech types, which are not the same thing, who don't understand the realities of day-to-day Americans. We talked about the realities of day-to-day Americans and how they would benefit from clean energy, and are only doing it because they are scared, not because it's in our interest. We've discussed that. Let's move on to the second sentence. They don't take into consideration rural dwellers who are most reliant on existing fossil fuels for income, business, and transport, and their solutions aren't practical in places we live. Okay, so again, we did talk about, for example, how it's a misunderstanding that wind cannot happen in cold places, and so there's just a misunderstanding about whether or not solutions are practical in spaces. We already saw that Texas actually is the second largest solar user of the states, so not true that it can only happen for that people that are like not in blue states won't benefit or whatever. And then also a lot of areas in like Georgia and Arizona are rural areas, and so they're also benefiting from solar, because if you are the type of person that doesn't want the government staring at you or whatever, it's way easier to get off the grid if you use solar or wind than if you're reliant on fossil fuels, right? Seems to go with the whole libertarian mindset, in my opinion. But I mean, oh yeah, they can go straight down the Mississippi and into the intercoastal. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a huge reason why the Midwest ended up being a big manufacturing hub. But also, again, let's look at the subsidies for building in historically historic energy communities. So Inflation Reduction Act, subsidies for building in what is it? Traditional energy communities? What are they called? Traditional energy communities. I feel like that's not the right term. They use a different term, but hopefully it'll show up. Okay, here's a summary of the IRA. Yeah, so clean energy tax credits and other provisions included in the bill would increase energy production at home and accelerate energy innovation abroad. Additionally, by investing in disadvantaged communities, prioritizing projects that reutilize retired fossil fuel infrastructure and employ displaced workers, and including incentives for climate-smart agriculture practices, the IRA would make meaningful progress towards fair, equitable, and economic clean energy transition. This is why the IRA matters, by the way. That's a pretty decent difference. Let's see, where is it? Bye. Thank you so much for coming, Maple Leaf Dragon. I always appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you for the biddies again. Let's see. Yeah, okay. Applies a 10% bonus for facilities located in energy communities defined as brownfield sites or fossil fuel communities. So there you go, right there. And then they also provide tax credits if they support union work and if they also support building facilities in disadvantaged communities that have been harmed by fossil fuel pollution, which definitely can overlap also with the energy communities. So you got both of them right there. And then it also prioritizes domestic manufacturing. So that's another argument that we see for clean energy, is that clean energy equates to reliance on China. Now, that obviously has some fair elements to it. Right now, China is responsible for 80% of clean energy products for the most part. Most of the pieces in solar panels come from China. However, that's because we just haven't prioritized the domestic production of clean energy, and also because China is really good at subsidizing things to shit so that it undercuts the price of everything else. That's not new for just clean energy. Frankly, if we're having a conversation about being reliant on China, we can look at the sticker of practically anything we own, and it's in China. So it's interesting when people only use that argument for clean energy, which you see a lot with a lot of these arguments for clean energy, is that they're not only applicable to clean energy, but they could be talking about a bigger issue having to do with just the fact that manufacturing in the US has really gone to China in general, not just for clean energy facilities. So that's important to keep in mind as well. But it is a fair issue. And actually, in my new climate recap, I'm going to be talking about labor issues in the clean energy supply chain right now. And I think that another misconception that people have about environmentalists that focus on clean energy is that they assume that they're burying their heads in the sand when it comes to the problems of clean energy. And that's not true, because the only way you can improve a system is if you look at the problems head on, which is what we're doing here, right? So, well, right now we're looking at the good things, but we can also look at the bad things, because there's plenty of bad things to go around, to be fair. But that's the case with all energy, which is why it's important to diversify your energy supply so that you're not fully reliant on one form of energy to satiate all of your energy needs. Hey, what's up, Carlos? How's it going? If anybody watching does not know A Difficult Truth, definitely check them out. They're a really cool, progressive news covering Twitch channel. And they're also a mod, so be on your best behavior. I often find that to be projection from them. Exactly. A lot of us are solution oriented. It's super true. That's super true. And that's like I hear that all the time. Like, people will talk to me about the problems of clean energy transition stuff as if I've never heard of their arguments before, as if I'm going to be absolutely shocked. You know, it's the same kind of thing for Trump supporters who think that we simp Biden the same way they simp Trump. It's like, no. We recognize that he's way, way too old to be in office right now. He's now officially the first 80-year-old in the White House. And we do recognize that some of his policy decisions don't line up with our better interests. We are just choosing the less of two evils, right? Like, so yeah, no, it is a lot of projection, which is very interesting. And that actually is something else that I noticed in this larger paragraph is talking about saying it's easy for a Democrat living in California to talk big about clean energy because they can easily get transport, easily get charging stations, and easily get income without the need for fossil fuels. But what does a state like Texas do to curb it? So interesting, because California and Texas really aren't that different when it comes to how much of their energy comes from clean energy. And then also further up, there was assumptions about what progressive people think of rural people. And in this same breath, we're talking about assumptions of rural people think of people that live in California. For example, I live in an agriculture hub. There's still conservative and rural places in California, just like there's also metropolitan and progressive places in Texas. So to act like California is a monolith is just as hypocritical as acting like Texas is a monolith, right? Yeah, we know that there's going to be some issues with clean energy. It's just better than fossil fuels, and fossil fuels are currently one of the biggest factors. Exactly. Joe Biden is just harm reduction. Exactly. So it's not like we're simping the guy, and it's not like we're simping clean energy too. But clean energy is just vastly better than fossil fuels in many, many ways. And yeah, we're not acting like it's without any form of waste, which is why we're talking about the closed loop system potential of moving towards clean energy. We're talking about all these issues so we can work them out ahead of time instead of, I don't know, doing all the research back in the 80s and then just burying the research instead of improving your product. Oil, gas, and coal supplies are going to fade out soon. Hopefully. Yeah, Houston, DFW, SA are all strongly blue. Yes. And obviously Austin too. Yeah. I mean, it's the usual, right? The cities are the bluest and then the rural areas are more red. Like, that's the case in every single state. So it's not really that surprising, which is why when you look at the like, you know, the state, or the country, it looks very red, but that's because the larger swaths have less people in them. And so they just make it seem like the country is redder than it actually is. I believe Joe is up for green job creation too. Yeah, definitely. I mean, he has been definitely the climate president out of our history of presidents going back to Nixon. He is definitely the most environmental president that we've had. And there's still way a lot of criticisms that we can give to him. But he has done a lot of good stuff for the country. So, but the annoying thing is about presidential terms is that you can be putting in all the work for your 4 years, but the effects might not happen until your predecessor, or your not predecessor, your successor is in office, and then they take credit for it. That's just what happens over and over and over again, is you have a president that actually does stuff and are brought into the presidency in a bad situation, and they're blamed for the bad situation even though that wasn't even their fault. And then they're not given the credit for the good stuff that they're doing because the good stuff doesn't show up until after they're out of the office. And it's just, for some reason, that just seems like a duh thing to me. Like, it seems like Americans should just know that, but it shocks me every time how we have the same arguments for opposition in like midterms and stuff like that, blaming the president for either stuff that is international and they can't even control, or for stuff that their predecessor did. It's stupid. You would think that Americans would have learned by now, but we just don't. I don't know. Hey, what's up, Erbelin? How's it going? We're talking about all kinds of clean energy misconceptions, just kind of having a chat about it. And by that, I mean I'm going on a rant now. But yes, bottom line, assumptions make an ass out of you and me. And we need to remember that when it comes to both sides. And also that there might be some projection going on when it comes to arguments against clean energy. I have orange juice from breakfast that I never drank. Anyways, I want to watch the PragerU video because it's been a while since I've watched it. And I think it has a lot of really good examples of practice when it comes to critical thinking skills in the ways of talking about clean energy, talking about the energy transition in general. So let's take a look at that. So when we first look at a PragerU video or any video, it's important to start with who is talking. Who did they get as their expert? And is that expert potentially biased? So let's start there. So who is the expert of this video?
We're headed toward an exciting all-renewable.
Oh boy. Oh man, I forgot how much I love this video. Okay. So this video, oh, excuse you. I did not tell you to start. Hey. Shh. So that's Mark Mills. Mark Mills is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and author of The Cloud Revolution. Compares, so let's look at the Manhattan Institute. We can also look at PragerU too. Let's start by looking at PragerU fossil fuels. Yeah, it's going to give me a lot of... Okay, maybe I need to do fossil fuel funding. Let's do funding. (2016) Fossil fuels, the greenest energy. Oh boy. Why you should love fossil fuels. So you see they've kind of gone back on their propaganda over the last few years, but even looking at the previous stuff, you can tell they're not exactly unbiased. But then again, you can also say that from looking at my videos. If I have a video that says why clean energy is great, then obviously it seems like I have a bias towards that. So I guess it matters more whether or not you're presenting the facts, right? But let's look at DeSmog. DeSmog is a really good website for talking about just different corrupt organizations and politicians. They're really good at digging the dirt out for people. So let's take a look at that. And sorry, my computer is definitely slow. Building blocks for energy storage. MGA thermal tour. Okay, building blocks for energy storage. We can look at that. We'll look at that in a bit, okay? Okay, So PragerU is a 501c3 nonprofit conservative media organization founded in 2011 by the radio talk show host and author Dennis Prager and his business partner Alan Estrin. As noted on its website, Prager University is not an accredited academic institution and does not offer certifications or diplomas. I feel like there needs to be another word for, like, it's not greenwashing, but it's like academic washing. What would that word be? What's a good color for academia? Ivy washing? Because I feel like there needs to be a term for that, because this is a great example of, and we see it all the time with unaccredited things acting like they're accredited by putting the word university or college or whatever into their title. It's very much washing. It's not real. It's deceptive. According to Rewild Profile, Dennis Prager has historically fought against what he describes as liberal evils, marriage equity, feminism, and multiculturalism, terrible things. And PragerU is targeted at middle school and high school kids. Okay. Now I want to get to the climate stuff. Yep. PragerU's videos generally don't cite statistics or sources. True. Grifting. Yes, grifting is a term for it. Okay, yes. Religious right. Again, there's a lot of information here on their whole history. Feminism, that's always so fun. There we go. Stance on climate change. PragerU's environmental science course is dominated by videos of prominent climate change deniers, including Alex Epstein, Björn Lomborg, who I actually have a book from, who talks about how the Earth is actually cooling. That's fun. Patrick Moore, and Richard Lindzen. One example titled "What They Haven't Told You About Climate Change," Patrick Moore claims that climate change is far from a recent human-caused disaster and is, for a myriad of complex reasons, a fact of life on planet Earth. Boy, wouldn't it be sad to just have, like, warming happening and incredible, terrible, catastrophic things become more likely and you have no control over it? I'd rather have more control over it, don't you think? Is that the Just Have a Think video? Because we already watched that on Tuesday, remember? That's all they say? To smog, you're usually covering climate stuff. Okay. There was another one I saw by weather.com. So let's go back over there. Oh, no. My computer's struggling. I might be doing too many links. Okay. Let's just go to this one and then we'll look at the Manhattan Institute and then we'll actually get into the video. So this is the Weather Channel. A very biased source, right? Okay, so a course on climate misinformation. Prager University is not a university, and the facts it preaches aren't necessarily facts. It is named after someone named Prager, though. A video on social media entitled "Fossil Fuels, the Greenest Energy" has been viewed over 1.5 million times. That was the one we saw briefly back in 2016. Presented by the fossil fuel proponent, the video flubs a major debate and soberly translates between obvious inaccuracies and out-of-context claims. The presenter of the crispy produced video, Alex Epstein, is not a climate scientist, but the founder for a for-profit think tank. His technique, that of an apparent but not really expert providing no or false sources, is one of several used in climate disinformation campaigns. And the fracking billionaire funded online university called PragerU is using it to misinform millions. Wow. I know. I know. To have the Weather Channel come after you is a new low, in my opinion. uh, at his core, Dennis Prager believes in conservative Judeo, arguably just Christian values and Americanism. Over 3 decades, the conservative radio talk show host has catchized millions on liberal evils and postured for a simpler, happier, more exclusive, and God-fearing nation. Though tamer in demeanor than, say, Rush Limbaugh, the 70-year-old is there's too many words I can't pronounce. Bellicose when it comes to morality. So principled is the conservative that in 2011 he wrote that Donald Trump's use of expletives rendered him unfit to be a presidential candidate, let alone president. Ooh, that's kind of funny. This article, by the way, was written in 2018, so they didn't even know how ironic that would be. Oh, wait, no, they did, because that was 2016. Oh, man, I can't keep track of time at this rate. Anyways, when tempered by the actual Trump presidency, however, that principle snapped like a cheap blade. In 2011, PragerU founded his eponymous online university, PragerU, as a tax-exempt, oh good, we love that, 501c3 organization. Quote, PragerU is not an accredited academic institution and does not offer certifications or diplomas, but it is a place where you are free to learn. While it's not an actual university, PragerU is decidedly a place for ideas and education, and perhaps some of the most widely held viewed conservative videos on social media, which is why we're covering it, because if they're still promoting climate misinformation, we need to talk about it. This video that we're going to watch is only 8 months old. Since 2011, the Conservative Foundation's slick, richly animated 5-minute videos have been watched by over 1.7 billion people on Facebook and YouTube. 60% of their viewers, according to the company, are under the age of 35. That's terrifying. Around 400 digestible courses break down the complex issues at the heart of Prager's worldview. Why I Left the Left, Black, Millennial, Female, and Conservative. Is Islam a religion of peace? And why isn't communism as hated as Nazism? Boy, that last one's a real title. And over a dozen of PragerU's videos on social media platforms and YouTube are pro-fossil fuels and climate skeptical. Here we go. This isn't much of a surprise given that PragerU's largest initial donors were the fracking billionaire Wilks Brothers, whose millions of dollars in donations helped get the platform up and running, characterized by some as the Koch brothers of the Christian right. Boy, maybe we need to dive into them sometime. Dan and Ferris Wilks are not shy about their views on the reality of human-caused climate change. Ferris, a pastor, told his parishioners in 2013, if God wants the polar ice caps to remain in place, then he will leave them there. Gives us a lot of autonomy, don't you think? Like the Koch brothers, the Wilks have used their wealth and influence to influence policy. During the 2016 U.S. president election, the Wilks poured $15 million into a super PAC supporting Ted Cruz. In 2014, the brothers spent, according to Reuters, $800,000 in political contributions to Texas state legislators after the city of Denton banned fracking. Texas then passed a law that prevented a ban on fracking by municipalities. In an email to the Weather Channel Digital, Prager clarified that his organization no longer receives funding from the Wilks. Further, he notes it is inconceivable a donation would influence what we present. Perhaps then Prager's dissemination of climate misinformation comes from personal conviction. Indeed, he provided a great deal of clarity in his views on climate change with the Weather Channel Digital. Quote, I am convinced that rich Westerners who make up the environmental movement don't give a damn about Africans and what other people around the world who desperately need electricity to merely begin to attempt to acquire the quality of life we have, all thanks to fossil fuels, he wrote. I am convinced the environmentalist is more a religion than a truth-seeking, remedy-seeking movement. Doesn't this sound like what you hear from conservatives all the freaking time? That is so pro small government of you, Texas. Exactly. So true, right? That is so free market of you, Texas, to ban the ability to ban fracking. It's so funny because every time municipalities try to do something Abbott and his buddies don't like, they come in and overpower it. They have been doing the same with cities trying to decrim drugs here. Interesting. I'm not surprised. And they're trying to do that with ESGs too, for like, BlackRock to be inspired to move towards a fossil fuel free portfolio, just as a reasonable thing to do when you don't want to have stranded assets in your portfolio. But Texas and other states bullied BlackRock so heavily that they have done beyond a 180 on their position when it comes to how the private sector should be involved in finances and climate finance. It's impressive. They are efficient. They are effective, I will say. Influenced by donors or not, Prager has used the Wilkes riches and millions of donations from other religious and conservative foundations in a strategic campaign to fight what he sees as the hostile anti-American, anti-God forces on the left. In contrast to the fast-paced production of social media competitors like BuzzFeed and Now This, Prager slow cooks, producing big-picture, evergreen videos, furnishing young, even school-age conservatives with talking points. Even well-produced videos cost between $25,000 and $30,000 to make, according to BuzzFeed News. Hello, person. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but hi. Hi, I want to offer promotion to your channel viewers. Yeah, I'm not interested. That's, I'm afraid, going to get you banned or whatever. Carlos is still here. Can you do it? My computer's being too slow. There we go. I did it. You proud of me? I'm proud of me. Okay. Go away. Streamlabs is being very, very slow. Good, thank you. Dang it, Maud, asleep at the wheel. Yeah, gosh, Carlos, get your shit together. Oh man, where were we? Okay, yeah. Okay, so basically, and then it goes into, yeah, and now it's more than 97, by the way, at this point, I think. Well, when was this written? This was, again, 2018, I think, so now it's 99, so because they've looked over the 3%, and they're like, oh, you either had special interests or you missed something big about the science, and now the number's gone up to like 99. Yes. Okay. So that is PragerU. Next one is the Manhattan Institute. Yeah. Again, if the Weather Channel goes after you, you know you fucked up. Like that's just okay. So let's see. Fossil fuel funding. Okay, Dismog, do better this time than you did on PragerU. I don't need 10 million paragraphs. I just need you to give me the juice. Give me the good stuff. Oh, but you could also see the Kochs brothers already in there. Okay, so the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research, originally known as the International Center for Economic Policy Studies, was founded in 1978 by Anthony Fisher and William Casey, and in recent years has promoted climate science contrarianism while defending policies supporting the development of fossil fuels. That seems unbiased. Hey, Levelhead, how's it going? Welcome, welcome. We are looking now at the Manhattan Institute as we're gearing up to watch a wonderful PragerU video that is narrated by a member at the Manhattan Institute. It's great. It's really fun. So, as you can see, they're very unbiased. You know, totally going with the science here. Anthony Fisher was influential in the formation of several other think tanks, including the Atlas Economic Research Foundation, the Fraser Institute, the London-based Institute for Economic Affairs. William Casey later became President Ronald Reagan's CIA director. Okay. The stated mission of the New York-based Manhattan Institute is to develop and disseminate new ideas that foster greater economic choice and individual responsibility. And by that you mean disseminate the same ideas that we have been fed in the last 50 years to foster economic failure and and individual numbness. Did I get that translation correct? I think I was pretty on board with that one. Did you see the last headline? It said, do 97% of scientists really agree? And the paragraph below just said, yes. Yes, I did see that. Done. Oh my goodness. What the heck? A random thing just showed up on my screen. I don't know what that is. Go away. I don't know what you are, but you're blocking my screen. I don't even know what you are. Go in the corner. Okay. Only going to be working with one screen for not too much longer, we hope. Okay. According to the Manhattan Institute's website, the think tank produces ideas. Oh, wait. No, that's different. Produces ideas that are both literally and figuratively outside of the Beltway. We have cultivated a staff of senior fellows and writers whose provocative books, essays, reviews, interviews, speeches, and op-ed pieces communicate our message and influence the debate. Because there's a debate. That's the thing. They're still stating there's a debate, and that's already incorrect. And good, you're hand picking people with the exact same thoughts as you. What could go wrong? The Manhattan Institute has contended that it is unclear whether human activity is causing global climate change. Despite the certitude with which the media and politicians treat the issue, the science remains muddled. Wow. Yes, we're just going to keep the scientists out of this list of people that also think that it's true. Anyways, and here's Mark Mills right here. Mark Mills is the person that is doing the video. So here's Mark Mills. Regular contributor to the international newsletter World Climate Report. That's interesting. Oh, look, in his thing, there's global warming skepticism right there. I wonder what he thinks. He was listed as a science advisor for the Greening Earth Society, a group that was funded and controlled by Western Fuels Association, an association of coal-burning utility companies. WFA founded the group in 1997, according to the archived version of its website, as a vehicle for advocacy on climate change, the environmental impacts of CO2, and fossil fuel use. This is called an AstroTurf group. Oh, yeah. And then ties to the American Legislative Exchange Council, which arguably helped write the legislative cases that are then brought in front of the Supreme Court, such as West Virginia v. EPA and other things that are against the clean energy transition. Remember them. They're very important. They're very influential for conservative legislative writing. The Manhattan Institute is going to make me run my head through the wall. Me too. Me too, man. Need for a political cartoon of these people surrounded with all the evidence just covering their eyes with their hands. If you can draw, please send me that. I would love that. The UK has officially had the warmest autumn in recorded history. Yes, well, yeah, they had the hottest Armistead earlier this month too, right? A local official dared to utter the words climate change in an interview to me on Wednesday, and I was like, was it in good context? What was the context? I'm so curious. It was a water conservancy district director. Hard to ignore when your job is water related in the West. Very true. You know it's real when the people on the ground in jobs that are impacted by climate change have no choice but to talk about climate change. That's how you know. That's pretty cool though. It's always fun to have that happen, and hopefully I hope for you that happens more often. Okay, so I think we have a pretty good idea on the biases of this video, right? Okay, so let's take a look at the video now, which was from 8 months ago. Obviously, PragerU is not being as obvious as they used to be with their fossil fuel stances, but let's still see what their take is on how much energy is needed to power the world, which seems like a very... Oh my gosh. Stop. I did not give you permission. Okay, so the title, How Much Energy Will the World Need, seems pretty harmless. It seems like it's just kind of a technical question that doesn't necessarily feel like it needs to have much room for debate. It's just a simple, how much world will the world need? Or how much energy will the world need? Okay, how many times do I have to... And I guess if I were to try to answer this question straight up, how much energy will the world need? Well, human population is still increasing, and also people currently in the world don't all have access to the regular energy that we take for granted. So the world definitely needs more energy than it currently has now, right? Especially in developing countries. Now, what about when we're talking about increasing energy efficiency? Because that's also really important to keep in mind, is that as technology improves, we should also be improving our energy efficiency so that we just don't require as much energy to do things. And it'll be interesting to see if they also talk about the energy efficiency side of how much energy the world will need in the future, because that definitely should be a factor that's integrated into this video, right? The word they used before was aridification, like, that's because of climate change. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a very common thing, right? Is they talk about the symptoms, but they don't talk about the why. And again, I think it's possible for you to go through all of the climate change conversation without bringing up the term climate change, but it makes it easier for people's opinions to be swayed if they don't have that foundation of climate change understanding at the end of it, because then they could be convinced that it's being caused by other things, or that events are completely unrelated, or that we don't need to prepare in the future because we've already hit what is considered new normal. So that can be problematic. Also, during aridification, the climate changes. Wow. This is true. It causes like a positive feedback loop where the drier it gets, the less vegetation can grow, and then it continues to dry further, and then you end up with desertification. Yeah. Okay, guys, you ready? You can see that's already starting very helpfully. You ready? I'm ready. Here we go.
We're headed toward an exciting, all-renewable energy future. Wind and solar will power the world of tomorrow. And tomorrow isn't far off. It's time to wake up.
What a start. Are we watching a PragerU video? Interesting. I'm ready for the brainworms. Yes, so we just finished talking about how this guy is a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, which is completely designed around pro-fossil fuel stances and continuing to believe that climate change is a debate. He has ties with the American legislative... What does ALEC stand for? American Legislative Exchange Council, which is fundamental in a lot of conservative policies that are anti-climate change. So they've done a lot of that. And then also PragerU got its initial funding from gas and fracking. So that is the unbiased platform in which we are watching this video. And as you can already see, they've already immediately put clean energy as a pipe dream. right? Clean energy immediately has already been made a pipe dream within 12 seconds of watching this video. So, great start. I wonder if we're going to talk about why that transition is necessary, because that's another thing that people want to talk about, is they want to talk about clean energy existing on its own as an option other than fossil fuels, without talking about the root cause of why we need to transition. That's a pretty easy way to straw man this whole argument, is just not talking about the why, which is, again, when we were talking about climate change and when it's not being brought up, but other things are brought up that are results of climate change. That lack of foundation makes it really easy for people to be convinced that other things are the reason why, or that the solutions are not urgently necessary. For people who work in agriculture, water, climate change is undeniable, but they don't like the term. Even if they admit it's real, it's still a question of what causes it. Yeah, global warming was the same thing, which is one of the reasons why I got switched to climate change, though also because people got the impression that global warming only resulted in things getting warmer instead of things getting weirder. And they're going to keep chipping away at the possible terms that can be used, like climate crisis is too much. Okay, what about climate change? Climate change, it's too much. Okay, what else do we call it? Like, we can create a third term, but they're going to keep doing the same thing. They're just going to keep making it politicized, right? That damn big tech leftists, exactly. I'll tell you what the cause is. It's HARP. The government shouldn't be messing around with such things. Exactly. Keep out of. Don't give me them vaccines with the microchips. I only want to be tracked by my phone and being connected to the grid using those nice yummy dinosaur juices. That's literally what my grandma says. Okay, grandma, let's let you to bed. That played a large role in me leaving ag, the burying our heads in the sand about our supply chain issues, which is ironically what we're talking about at the beginning of the stream, because they usually say they're burying their heads in the sand about the true cost of clean energy. Exactly. It's totally projection. It's projection, and it's short-term thinking as well, because we can continue to just talk about the immediate things instead of moving on to other things. Like I posted this short video of South Africa moving towards clean energy and its clean energy plan, and I got my usual libertarian in the DM talking about how, oh well, they should focus more on human trafficking instead, or whatever, and that the people on the ground wouldn't care about climate change when their kids are getting stolen and all that kind of stuff. First of all, why are we only talking about that with South Africa? Okay, questionable. Secondly, you think that poor people are not going to be impacted by climate change? They're already being impacted by climate change, and things such as human trafficking helps destabilize the government structure that would otherwise help curb human trafficking, making it worse. Not that the libertarian necessarily believes that governments are necessary in the first place, which is funny, because then when we went further into the conversation, I kind of use him as practice. But when we move further into the conversation, he was talking about, what was it? I have to look at it just because, the answer to his concern was government, but he didn't want to look at government being the answer to the discussion, which was really funny to me. Yeah. It's more clear if you live in one of those countries where your family and siblings are all at risk of getting abducted and enslaved for their lives. They for sure would not say a climate plan is a priority. And I said, okay, it's the government's job to care about a long-term issue, which is not even that long-term, like climate change, so that everyday people don't have to. That's the point of the government, is focusing on the longer-term issues also, because you can't expect people to regulate corporations on their own. We don't all have the time to look up information constantly. And so that's the point of government, is long-term memory of civilization and providing regulations and information that the average person does not have time in their daily lives to do. And we seem to forget that. Anyways, my little rant. Okay, let's go back to the video. Right. Clean energy, pipe dream. We'll see if he talks about climate change at all or as the why of we're needing to transition, right?
A dream. Here's the reality. Oil, natural gas, and coal provide 84% of all the world's energy. That's down just 2 percentage points from 20 years ago. And oil still powers nearly 97% of all global transportation. Contrary to headlines claiming that we're rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuels, it's just not happening.
Two things with this. One, you're right, sir. It's not happening fast enough. That's the whole freaking argument that environmentalists have for moving faster. And it's too quiet. Oh, I'm so sorry. Here, okay, let me go back and we'll re-look at it. Sorry about that. I'm getting too fast with my commentary. I haven't checked to see if you guys can actually hear what they're saying. Okay, let's go back. Let me know if this is still too quiet. I'll try to make it as loud as I can.
We're headed toward an exciting all-renewable energy future. Wind and solar will power the world of tomorrow. And tomorrow isn't far off. It's time to wake up. You're having a dream. Here's the reality. Oil, natural gas, and coal provide 84% of all the world's energy. That's down just 2 percentage points from 20 years ago. And oil still powers nearly 97% of all global transportation. Contrary to headlines claiming that we're rapidly transitioning away from fossil fuels, it's just not happening. 2 decades and $5 trillion of governments investing in green energy, and we've barely moved the needle. This was supposed to be easy. Why is it so hard?
You guys want to give a guess on why it's been so hard? Does it have anything to do with potentially the same people that funded this organization known as PragerU? Just, I don't know. Why do you think it's been so hard for the cheapest form of energy to take over the free market? I'll let you answer that question because I think you know.
In a word, rocks. To get the same amount of energy from solar and wind that we now get from fossil fuels, we're going to have to massively increase mining by more than 1,000%. This isn't speculation, this is physics. Copper, iron ore, silicon, nickel, chromium, zinc, cobalt, lithium, graphite, and rare earth metals like neodymium. We need them all. And then those metals and materials have to be turned into motors, turbine blades, solar panels, batteries, and hundreds of other industrial components. That also takes lots of energy, which requires even more mining. As a World Bank study put it, these green technologies are in fact significantly more material intensive than our current energy mix. That may be the understatement of the century. Raw materials account for 50 to 70% of the costs to manufacture both solar panels and batteries. Until now, it hasn't really mattered that much because wind and solar still account for only a few percentage points of the global energy supply. They're an applause line for environmentalists, not a major energy player, and it's unlikely they will be in the foreseeable future. But for the sake of argument, let's say we sharply ramp up mining. Where would these new mines be located? Well, for one, China. That country is today the single largest source of most of our critical energy materials. The United States is not only a minor player, but is dependent on imports for 100% of 17 critical minerals.
Oh, there's so much to talk about. But see, this is why I wanted to watch this video, because these arguments are used a lot by people that do not support the clean energy transition, right? So let's break down some of these arguments. Spends decades funding misinformation and lobbying governments. Why haven't we transitioned to clean energy yet? Exactly. Can we somehow blame China for this? No? Well, then I don't know. Also accurate. Too bad I don't believe in hell because these people are complicit in genocide. Also true. Yeah. So Okay, touche video. So that's the thing, though, is that we have for decades put our head in the sands and not prioritized clean energy production. And now we have to ramp up way faster than we used to have to ramp up. And now the argument is, oh, well, we can't move fast enough because we don't have enough public support or because we don't have the infrastructure in place. Now, why don't we have the infrastructure in place? Could it be because we were burying our heads in the sand for decades? That might have something to do with it. PragerU speaker, it's simple physics, continues to talk about chemistry. That's so true. That's a good one. I didn't even catch that. That's freaking hilarious. Oh my gosh. Yes. And what is his background? Sorry, this is Mark. Is he even like a scientist of any form? Oh, he did have a degree in physics, so he should know better. Oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I am working on new equipment. Yeah, sorry guys. You got to rely heavily on my audio. I'm very sorry about that. But yes, it will improve soon. That's pseudo academia for you, pretty much. China is not rich in minerals, it's just buying up world resources. Exactly. So that's the other thing that's not even accurate is that a lot of that minerals, for example, comes from like the Democratic Republic of Congo. Like they do have mines in China, but it's not from China. China is the one that makes the initial parts of the clean energy products, not the mining minerals. They buy the mining minerals from other places and then they turn it into these products and then they sell it to places like the US and Europe. So they're not even the ones that are mainly the miners. So that's already inaccurate. And then also another thing that's inaccurate is actually, okay, so this video was done 8 months ago. Let's double check. Let's see how much energy is from, and let me get rid of some of these links so that I can like help my computer out a little bit here. Okay, we'll keep those two. Yeah, so a lot of things have changed. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of things have changed since Gramps got his BS in physics as well. Exactly. So it's just funny that it's a bunch of old people. They get a lot from Australia. Yes, Australia is another really big one too. I know Indonesia has a lot of critical minerals, as well as like some parts of Latin America. Mexico has some lithium ion mines or lithium mines. So it comes from many different places. Ironically, a lot of the people with physics training over 70 I know are all climate change deniers. That is very interesting, isn't it? That is very interesting. I've noticed that a lot of the climate deniers that I encounter are engineers. I don't know what that means, but that's what I've noticed. And also like completely unrelated things like musicians or something like that. I'm like, okay, cool. So let's see here. How much of the world is powered by clean energy? Yeah, the lithium mining has honestly been a really big issue for me. Yeah, I think it's completely fair to critique mining as a process, and I will agree that clean energy production is more mining heavy or more critical mineral heavy than fossil fuel production. However, it's not more mining heavy because fossil fuel production still requires a lot of land degradation, not even including the output of things like climate change and oil spills, which also impact the environment. So if we're looking at things evenly here, just because critical minerals are needed for clean energy does not mean that therefore clean energy is the only thing harming the environment when you compare it with fossil fuels. Weird. And also that's why we need to argue for a recycling industry, right? Because we shouldn't only be using primary products, point blank period. But that is a conversation that we've already been having And so acting like that conversation has never been had is disingenuous. Also, about 30% of the world's electricity comes from renewables, so I'm really not sure where he got that statistic from. Just saying. Maybe things have changed in 8 months, but very interesting. So, I believe the car one. I believe like most cars are still combustible engines, obviously. So that's fair, but like that's not okay, so we're already inaccurate as well. I'm really curious about this World Bank study. I kind of feel like knowing them, they took it out of context. But there's no links or anything to even look at what their sources were. Where's the source list, my dude? Oh, facts, sources, and okay. Let's see if we have... Let's see if we have some sources here. North America has large lithium deposits in Utah. Also true. I think Southern California as well. Wait, this is just the same. Hold on. No, stop. 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 Okay, I'm just muting you. I muted you. Boy, they don't listen very well, do they? Okay, so this is the same video on the PragerU website. It was supposed to be the sources. Where's the sources? Facts and sources. Okay, here we go. Whew, this is hard. Yeah, that's so dumb. Okay, but also, all right, so here's the sources. Where's, oh, World Bank. Hey, we actually got the document from World Bank. Cool, we got there. Did you say that before you knew? That's funny. But they actually did provide sources, so that's something. Let's take a look at the World Bank study that he quoted. If it loads, you know, because, yeah. Okay, here we go. Growing role of minerals and metals. Oh boy. Growing role of minerals and metals for low carbon future. This is from 2017, so keep that in mind. They published this video 8 months ago, and the best they could do is an article from 2017. Okay. So there's a lot here. Yeah, we actually got a study. I know it's shocking. But the question is, did they utilize the study in a actual true way, you know? Okay, so they were referring to the demand for metals will increase. Maybe. Does it not go anywhere when I click on it? Well, that's annoying. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of different figures. Okay, cool. Okay. Mineral resourcing and climate change are inextricably linked, not only because mining requires a large amount of energy, but also because the world cannot tackle climate change without adequately supplying raw minerals to manufacture clean technologies. Okay. A review of literature shows that the issue of commodity supply of carbon-constrained future typically focuses on minerals and metals that are required for specific technologies. Concerns about the capacity of the industry to supply elements required to meet low-carbon future, the environmental and energy use impacts of increased extraction of those resources, and the relative vulnerability of developed countries to supply the critical minerals required for for the clean energy transition. Studies aside, argument is dumb considering the results of not transitioning. There is a path forward that is all upside, but the current trajectory is like ecosystem collapse. So true. And that's actually that you're right. Honestly, this thing, even if they were to cite it correctly, it doesn't even matter because the baseline argument of, well, we do this and that's the only option is disingenuous to begin with. So thank you, Levelhead, for bringing us back up to the bigger picture here. Apparently, they're trying to do brine extraction for lithium in Texas. Yeah, that's the same thing that's happening in SoCal, too, for the Salton Sea or something like that, I think. I interviewed someone who was talking about it once for the lithium extraction, Levelhead. Okay, but you are right. The fact that it requires more materials does not mean that we should not move in that direction, because at least again with clean energy, with the transition, people have all the facts. When we were moving towards fossil fuels, people didn't even have access to all the facts about the product to make a fully informed decision about whether or not it was right for us to move, because fossil fuels lied to us for many years. They're framing it as better than hard rock extraction. I want to know more about it. Yeah, it's because they had like a different form of technology that maybe would be a little less environmentally problematic, but it could be problematic in the sense that it's targeting like droughted areas. I don't really know. For extracting all kinds of rare minerals from produced brine water or water brine. Interesting. That's another form of research. It's another whole Friday episode, honestly. That's cool, though. If you have any links, do share in the chat or in Discord, and we can go over it sometime. Okay, back to the video.
In our current energy mix. That may be the understatement of the century. Raw materials account for 50 to 70% of the costs to manufacture both solar panels and battery.
And solar panels are still cheaper than fossil fuels, just saying.
Until now, it hasn't really mattered that much because wind and solar still account for only a few percentage points of the global energy supply.
Which is not true.
They're an applause line for environmentalists, not a major energy player, and it's unlikely they will be in the foreseeable future.
False.
But for the sake of argument, let's say we sharply ramp up mining. Where would these new mines be located? Well, for one, China. That country is today the single largest source of most of our critical energy materials. The United States is not only a minor player, but is dependent on imports for 100% of 17 critical minerals. Mm-hmm. Do we want to give China more political and economic leverage? Europe has made itself dependent on Russia for 40% of its natural gas. How well has that worked out? Ironically, we have all the minerals we need right here in North America. But good luck trying to get them out of the ground. Proposals to build mines in the United States and increasingly almost everywhere else meet fierce opposition, if not outright bans. Sure. To give just one example, in 2022, the Biden administration canceled a proposed copper and nickel mine in northern Minnesota. This was after years of delays navigating a maze of environmental regulations. And yes, the same environmentalists and green-leaning politicians who tout all the benefits of electric cars are the same people who make mining the materials essential to build those cars, like copper and nickel, all but impossible. Try to square.
So that's another common argument that we hear all the time. Like, oh, you say that you want to move towards clean energy, but you're blocking the critical mineral process. Now, I don't know exactly what happened in his particular case sample, but in a lot of examples of projects being blocked that I have seen, a lot of them have been blocked because they were on tribal land and the tribes did not give permission to use that land. So that's something. I hear that argument all the time of equating Europe's dependency on Russia with clean energy transition dependency on China. I hear that argument all the time. What's my main counter for that argument is that when you have already produced the solar panel products, those solar panels are good for an industry average of 25 years, which also people who don't understand the clean energy transition assume that batteries and clean energy, things like wind and solar, only last like a quarter amount of time as the actual industry average. So 25 years is the average lifespan of solar panels. So even if you got those products from China, you are now not reliant on China except for maybe some spare parts for 25 years. That's not the same thing as needing a constant flow of fossil fuels from Russia. It's not the same thing. So equating those two things doesn't really work. Also, again, how long has fossil fuels as an industry existed versus clean energy as an industry? Not the same thing. So when we're talking about creating stable supply chains for one product over the other, we have had significantly less time and also significantly less political will to actually move more towards domestic production. And that is due to idiots like this. But yeah, that's an argument that I hear a lot about comparing Russia and the dependency on natural gas with China and the dependency on clean energy. As if our entire energy supply chain isn't already reliant on China. True. Exactly. It's also a double standard because we are so reliant on China for so many things, but this is the one that we're only going to talk about? Really? Yes. Completely ridiculous argument. Thank you. So, but it's another one that is heard a lot, so it's important for us to keep in mind so we're prepared if we do hear that argument, how to respond.
Circle. So far, we've only talked about today's energy needs. What about tomorrow's? Future energy demand will be far greater than today's. That's been true for the entire history of civilization. The future will not only have more people, but also more innovations. And entrepreneurs have always been better at inventing new ways to use energy than to produce it. It's obvious but worth stating. Before the invention of automobiles, airplanes, pharmaceuticals, or computers, there was no energy needed to power them. And as more people become more prosperous, they will want the things others already have, from better medical care to vacations to cars. In America, there are about 80 cars for every 100 citizens.
Okay, so cool thing about innovation, innovation can also be used to increase energy efficiency for items as well. So it's also disingenuous to only suggest that energy innovation, that innovation in general will not lead to better use of the energy. And then it's also disingenuous to say that we are not prioritizing innovating in how that energy is produced, because we are. You're just not liking what the answer is. And then also it's very capitalistic of, everybody's going to want more. And it's like, okay, well that's capitalism's fault on that one. I saw a video recently that solar panel silicon wafers are so low profit compared to computer chips that they don't want to fund photovoltaic silicon. See, and that also is another thing too, is when some things are so dirt cheap, they end up not making economic sense, even though they would be of huge benefit, and so then they're not prioritized, because sometimes things actually don't require as many workers, or things are just so inexpensive that they're not profitable. That doesn't mean that they're bad technology. That just means that the system in which you're working with that technology doesn't value them as much. So then maybe look at the system.
Or computers, there was no energy needed to power them. And as more people become more prosperous, they will want the things others already have.
Thank you.
From better medical care to vacations to cars. In America, there are about 80 cars for every 100 citizens. In most of the world, it's about 5 per 100 citizens.
And that's only because they're developing countries. It has nothing to do with the idea of public transit being available for those people and not available in the US. It has nothing to do with public transportation at all in that assessment.
Over 80% of air travel is for personal purposes. So that's 2 billion barrels of oil a year. Hospitals use 250% more energy per square foot than an average commercial building.
Okay.
And the global information infrastructure, the cloud, already uses twice as much electricity as the entire country of Japan, the world's third largest economy. The massive data centers at the heart of the cloud alone consume almost 10 times more electricity than the world's 10 million electric cars.
So now he's just stating how situations are now and using that as a scare tactic to bring any listener into submission that there is no way that the situation can be solved because it's just too big. Notice he hasn't talked at all about why we need to transition in the first place. Again, disingenuous argument.
E-commerce has taken off and is propelling record growth in warehouses, increasingly filled with energy-hungry robots. America's truck freight index more than doubled in the past decade.
Also true. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to have healthcare. Wait, you advocated against that. Also true. They have loads of cheap high-speed rails in China. Yes. Curious.
Deliver the goods to and from those warehouses. These are today's known trends. While we can't predict the future, we can predict there'll be more innovation in robotics, drones, quantum computing, biotechnology.
And energy efficiency. What? And energy production. What? And energy storage. What?
In new industries not yet imagined. All of it will require more energy, a lot more. Fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and yes, renewables will be required. But if you think we could get it all from wind and solar, dream on. I'm Mark Mills, Senior Fellow at the Manhattan Institute for Prager University. Thank you for...
And that was actually the whole video. They managed to turn how much energy will the world need to we have no choice but to rely on fossil fuels into the full future, and therefore we're going to kill off our whole planet because that's the only way we can do things. I'm Manhattan Institute, and I approve this message. Wow, look at you and your lack of imagination. Literally. That is why you can get nowhere debating these fools. They say nothing in good faith, and so you will get to no solutions with them because they do not want solutions. The Rosie video will kill it. Okay, we can do the Rosie video one next. As an immediate response. Yeah, that is also another thing is, when you are talking with people, you got to figure out, first of all, whether or not they even think that climate change is an issue in the first place. Because if they don't even think climate change is an issue in the first place, then they are looking at business as usual as a stable option, which is already incorrect with reality. And sometimes it's not a lost cause. I've gotten people to, you have to go back and be like, oh, okay, well, there's a reason why we're doing this transition thing. And it's because, those whole droughts that you didn't really experience as much when you were younger, they're happening more now. Yeah. Can you resend me that link? Sorry. Can you resend me that link, Cosmic? We can go ahead and take a look at that one too. We can't predict the future, but we can definitely try our best to make it as horrible as possible. Exactly. Because I don't want to get off my old ass, so we're just going to keep doing the exact same thing as usual, at least until I die. But then I've also created a whole list of disciples of 35 or under that will continue my message of our innovative thinking of doing the exact same thing we did in 50 years and continue until only the wealthy will survive. Thank you very much. 14 minutes, that is a reasonable amount of time. So that's PragerU. I'm probably going to record myself doing a reaction to that video and publish it on YouTube because I just think it's really important to talk about the misconceptions. And again, that video was sent to me by a relative. So it's circulating. Actually, how many people viewed it? It's been viewed by almost 1.4 million people. Rosie, hold on.
In today's video, we're going to see a take on this from MGA.
Pause. But that's been seen by 1.3 million people, whereas this video that we're going to watch has only been seen by 7.1 thousand people. And that is the problem with our current situation. Which is why subscribe to all my channels and support me. And yeah. Which I'm talking to people that already are, but I appreciate you all very much. You can clip out of your VOD. What? I don't understand. Sound up on Rosie. Yes. Hold on. Okay. Do. Okay, here we go. Now here's Rosie's take on MGA thermal.
Thermal energy storage is one of the hot technologies of the energy transition. In today's video, we're going to see a take on this from MGA Thermal, who I visited a few months ago when I was in Newcastle, and I got a tour of their new pilot facility that they're in the process of putting together. I found out about the technology, the manufacturing process, and applications and their scale-up plans. I'm Rosie Barnes. Welcome to Engineering with Rosie. So yeah, thermal energy storage is a bit of a hot topic these days. You can store heat energy in a huge range of materials, from water to gravel and a lot of things in between. New versions of this tech pop up in the media pretty regularly. For example, there's been a Finnish sand battery getting a lot of attention recently. And on this channel, I've covered...
I would if the video wasn't so bad. See, that's the thing, is I want to be able to utilize these deep dive streams to produce content for YouTube more. And I will post it on the Beccasphere stream. But right now I know my video quality is so bad that I don't think I would put it on my regular YouTube channel. But hopefully that will change soon. But for now, I think I'm going to have to do a separate recording of the reaction to that video because of that. So, yeah.
energy storage company Steesdale, who are using gravel to store heat, and seasonal thermal energy storage projects in Canada and Scandinavia that simply use large pits of water. Basically, any material that you can heat up can be used for thermal energy storage. But ideally, it will be a cheap and abundant material that can store a lot of heat in a small space without causing too many problems as the material is heated and cooled repeatedly. The topic of today's video is an Australian startup company called MGA Thermal, who have a new material that they're using to store thermal energy that ticks a lot of the pros and not that many of the cons that I just mentioned. The MGA stands for Miscibility Gap Alloy, and that's their key innovation that came out of research from the University of Newcastle about 10 years ago. Since then, they've been working on the commercialization of that innovation, and now they're just about to start ramping up production. Their product is a solid brick with metal alloy distributed throughout in such a way as the metal alloy becomes molten, but the brick itself stays solid. So it's supposed to be kind of the best of both worlds between a molten metal that can hold a lot of thermal energy in a small space and a solid brick that's easily contained and doesn't cause a lot of problems with thermal expansion. I visited MGA's pilot manufacturing facility a few months ago and got a tour from Arden Jarrett, their business development manager. And then I spoke to their co-founder and CTO, Alex Post, separately online, since he wasn't available the day that I was in Newcastle, unfortunately. So first, let's ask Arden to show us MGA's thermal bricks and tell us what the miscibility gap alloy is and how it works.
We make these blocks and they're called miscibility gap alloy, which essentially means that there's two materials that'll never mix. It's like oil and water. No matter how much you shake them up, they're not going to mix up. The two materials are graphite and a metal alloy. We describe it like a chocolate chip muffin. If you heat up a chocolate chip muffin, the cake stays solid while the chocolate goes through a phase change and it melts while you heat it up. So our blocks are pretty much the same in that the graphite is a matrix which holds the aluminium alloy particles in place, and while that's melting, the particles go through a phase change and it stores more energy through a thing called latent heat.
So all those light spots, that's an aluminium alloy, and that's what's going to melt, and this matrix is some graphite, that's the cake, and then the aluminium is the chocolate chips.
There is a special ingredient in there.
I assume you're not gonna reveal it. How does the technology work and what makes it different from other thermal energy storage?
Our core invention is a composite material which is designed to store thermal energy. There are a lot of different thermal energy storage alternatives on the market which are generally based around repurposing existing materials like graphite, concrete, silica, existing material properties. Whereas we've gone back to first principles and said, what are the criteria that make a good material for thermal energy storage? Let's try and design a material that fills that purpose, and that's the heart of our technology.
And so what are those criteria then?
So safety, capacity, cost effectiveness, and sustainability. Safety is a big one. You have to look at events where you have a rupture of the thermal energy storage material, where it's exposed to atmosphere energy density. You have to be able to contain a lot of energy in a very small space, which intrinsically is hard to do safely because fuel can combust. We've seen batteries igniting. It's just hard to store a lot of energy in a small volume by definition.
How does it work?
You have material changing.
And that's another example of a good argument against clean energy products is that battery explosion problem. That's a reasonable argument, but that is an example of a innovation need, which we're exploring a possible substitution for. That is cool when you address a problem head on and you look for solutions and you allow scientists and business people to innovate those solutions, right? So again, when you have all the information about the pros and cons of a product, you can help make that product better. If you are misinformed about the cons of a product, then the product will never get better, aka fossil fuels.
From one form into another, you have a solid turning into a liquid. There's actually quite a lot of energy associated with that transition. It takes a lot of energy to melt something. When it freezes, you can get that energy back. So it's a good way of storing a lot of energy. The trouble with that is it's very hard to use that energy and to handle that material in a safe way. That means you've got to handle something when it's solid, but also when it's liquid. So it's hard to design infrastructure to contain that. In our case, we're looking at liquid metal. Liquid aluminium specifically will eat into almost any material that you want to contain it in. It's very hard to contain liquid aluminium. You have to be very, very careful with it. From a safety perspective, liquid metal at 700 degrees is obviously quite dangerous. And you also have to cope with quite a big volume change, the same as water freezing into ice. There's a big change in volume associated with that phase change, which means if you make a vessel to contain your liquid aluminium, when it freezes, it could crack that container because of differential thermal expansion, because of a volume change with that phase change. So we've tried to address all of those issues by making a composite, a solid block of graphite, and within that block we have small particles of aluminium, so individual grains which are completely isolated from one another, contained within this graphite block. And that means that from a large scale perspective, it's always just a solid block because those grains are all completely enclosed. But from the perspective of energy storage capacity, you're still melting that aluminium and storing all that energy. You just don't have to worry about all of the difficulties of handling it.
That's really cool. Thermal storage is very interesting to me, especially since it can be used for HVAC refrigeration, which represents so much of the plug loads in big buildings like hospitals. True. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, no, you're so right. That is a huge solution point for this technology. That's really cool. See? Smart people. We are smart as long as we don't convince ourselves that there's not a problem to innovate in the first place.
So then you've got these blocks. What are you going to do with them?
So there are a host of different ways that you could use technology like this. Waste process heat pumps, or direct electric heating through resistive heaters. The initial market that we're targeting is electric input. So we use electricity to power resistive heaters, which heat up our blocks. There is a lot of electricity available, which is very, very variable. The market that we're trying to target is to firm up that variable input from the grid or from a behind-the-meter solar farm to heat up our blocks electrically, and then to use that to provide a firm supply of either process heat for an industry or electricity to dispatch back onto the grid. So it's electric heating of our blocks. We heat them up to about 750 degrees when they're fully charged. So all of that aluminium that's contained in our blocks is fully liquid at that stage. It melts down at 660. Then we use that to heat up a flow of inert gas, which circulates across our bricks in an enclosed, insulated container, and then can be delivered to any process that we want downstream.
And you said it was the duration was 10 hours, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we can store for longer than that, but the pilot that we're performing at the moment is designed to provide 0.5 megawatt of steam for a continuous 10-hour period.
And can you just tell me what are some example applications that would need that kind of steam?
There are a whole bunch of industrial processes that require steam, though, like paper manufacturing, dairy, and quite often at the moment, the energy source for that steam is a gas-fired boiler. So obviously, people are trying to replace that to decarbonise, but they don't have a firm supply of that steam. Installing solar farms to power an electric boiler and that kind of thing, but they can't run that when there's no sunlight, so they have to shut down their entire process at the moment.
And how would you increase the power and the duration?
So to increase either the power or the duration, we just add more bricks, which means a larger insulated enclosure as well. Each of our bricks can store a kilowatt hour of thermal energy. In terms of dispatching heat, which is what we're demonstrating with this pilot, we're very, very efficient. First of all, we have the electric charging part of our process. In most electrical processes, heat is your form of losses. So electric heating is extremely efficient because your only loss mechanism is heat, which is what you're using. We're in the order of 98% efficient for our charging. We can store it. We lose about 2% per day of our stored capacity just as thermal losses from the container. And then discharging, we're also very efficient because we run a gas loop for this steam generation. Gas comes out of our storage, it goes through a heat exchanger which creates steam, and any heat that is left in that gas after it goes through that heat exchanger, which isn't transferred into steam, then goes back into our storage in a closed loop. So round trip for heat, we're well above 90% efficiency. And converting to electricity is a little bit harder for thermal storage because you have to run a heat engine. So for anyone listening who has a background in thermodynamics, they'd be aware that heat engines have something called the Carnot efficiency associated with them, which means you actually have limitations on efficiency dictated by the laws of physics, where you can't convert heat into electricity at 100%. A typical steam power cycle is in the order of 30%, maybe 40% efficient at the very large scale for a power station, which basically dictates our round-trip efficiency if we're producing electricity.
So round-trip efficiency to...
Yeah, I didn't know that. This shows my ignorance when it comes to anything agriculture. I didn't know that steam's required for dairy production. I don't know that. Why is that? Why is steam needed for dairy? I don't hear that talked about a lot when it comes to a need for heavy industry in dairy production. So that actually is surprising to me. So please expand if you can, Ms. Friz, on how steam is used for dairy production and pasteurization. I'm learning things. I love this. I always learn things in these streams. Oh, for microbial control. Oh, okay, that totally makes sense. Yeah. No, that was that. Yeah. Okay, I could see that. Interesting. They do pasteurization and UHT to treat bacteria. Fascinating. Huh. I never even thought about that, but that makes total sense. Thank you. Thank you for teaching me something.
You go from electricity to electricity is going to be in the 30%. Is that expectation?
In the 30 to 40% range. Yeah,
Okay, so that's obviously like a lot lower than a lithium-ion battery or pumped hydro or most kinds of energy storage that people are looking at. So what makes your technology attractive then? Like, when would you use it?
Round-trip efficiency isn't actually your key concern. If you have more energy than you know what to do with in the middle of the day, then as long as you can capture any of that to use when you need energy, as long as you can do that cost effectively, then it's worth doing. So what we're really trying to emphasize is that even though the round-trip efficiency is much lower than batteries,
What do you mean my stream dropped? It didn't show that. Was it just a buffer problem? Is it back? It's fine. We're going to do this video and then I'm going to leave y'all. So hopefully won't be too big of an issue. And that would be any plant that handles milk, even if they just make cheese. Interesting. Okay. We had a big cheese plant across the street from a dairy I worked on, and the boiler systems made it look like some oil field operation. That's really interesting. I did not know the heavy impact, or like the heavy energy impact of dairy production. Looks okay to you? It did here. You're good. Okay, cool. It's like 3 FPS, but it seems like it's streaming okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you for. Also, hey Zeoduck, how's it going?
Cost per joule of energy that you pay for that firm's renewable energy out of the back of the storage is still lower than batteries. And that's because the capital cost of our storage equipment is so low. So you're getting very, very cheap energy. You're storing it cheaply. You store the 30% that you can effectively recover, and then you discharge that.
One of our potential applications is repurposing thermal power stations into renewable energy storage facilities. So that means repurposing the turbine and the grid connectivity and the building itself, taking out the boiler and anything to do with the coal, putting in a TES unit with our bricks, and reusing the infrastructure to capture the electricity out on the other side.
That's like the Moss Landing plant near me was a thermal plant, and they replaced it and turned it into a battery storage plant. So there you go. I don't they use lithium instead of this, but this could be even more useful. Hey, good. Hope everyone's having a top Friday. Yes, we are. Here it's nice and sunny. It was raining yesterday, and it'll rain tomorrow, which is good things for California.
But because it's designed to be bulk energy storage, so the efficiency comes when it's a really large system. A lot of our most interested customers are solar PV farms because they're spec'd their output for 9 a.m. during the day. So it's peak load shifting, essentially. So if you collect a large amount of electricity during the day and then use that large amount at night.
Okay, as electricity though. And
yes,
they're happy to lose more than half of it.
because they wouldn't have been able to use it anyway.
Interesting. I'm also wondering if they could make steam-powered parlors. They have rotary parlors that the cows can step off and into when they're done being milked. It is like a carousel, and I wonder if they could make those steam-powered too. They run nearly all day, especially on farms that milk 3 times a day. Interesting. Rotary parlors. This is all completely new information to me. Fascinating. I'm just learning the inner workings of dairy production. This should have a very long life cycle system. Yes, I agree.
When you say it's going to be, much cheaper than batteries, is it that based on how much it costs you to make a brick today, or you've got some assumptions for the future about how costs are going to come down?
Yes, that's based on the costs of our current manufacturing capacity. We can make very, very large quantities of our bricks quite economically. And because we're using readily available raw materials, we don't have lithium, we don't have expensive materials in our bricks. Everything that they're made out of actually is in the top 25 most abundant materials on the Earth's crust.
What about recyclability? How long would a brick last for? And then what do you do with it at the end of the lifetime?
So we're targeting a usable lifetime for these bricks for 30 years. In reality, we haven't managed to break them yet. We haven't tested them to 30 years yet, but that is our target for the lifetime of the bricks. At the end of that lifetime, then, we can actually recover the raw materials that make up the bricks and recycle them back into new bricks. The 2 components that we make them out of are very, very happy to exist purely in isolation of each other. So when we crush them up and separate them into those raw materials, then we can essentially recycle them. It's like new feedstocks.
Is how small can you make it? Because every time people see something large-scale energy storage, they're like, oh, I want one of these in my house.
Okay, so there is a difficulty with having a thermal energy storage for household use, especially if it's for electricity. That's because you need this power cycle to convert the heat into electricity. That is a technology that doesn't yet exist at the household level, which means if we are to develop a household level product, it'll have to be for heat only. So that's our initial target. As crazy as it is, the need is there at the utility scale for technology. So we're targeting 100 megawatt plus sized installations of thermal storage.
which is great. It's totally fine to have a type of battery storage technology that doesn't work for households but does work for utility, just like it's perfectly fine to have something that's vice versa. You don't have to have a one size fits all solution, and so it mostly focuses on utility scale, which is completely appropriate. Um, the more they can use the energy in its current state rather than convert it to electricity and then power a motor with it increases efficiency. Yes. I believe so. So you want to get the most bang for your buck, right? So the least steps that you can have, the better. This process would be at a central plant, not made for small little local milking parlors. Okay, interesting. So it might be a little too big scale for parlors, but hey, maybe not small ones, but maybe big ones. The farmers could have energy capture at the farm and store energy from animal manure for all their electricity too. True. Biofuels could prove to be useful, or methane capture could be useful for kind of like a closed cycle in agriculture. Agriculture does definitely have a lot of emissions and chemicals to work with. Hey, you got Rue. Good job. Yes, kitty. Limo, they're already tried to do that with natural gas, and they have been having a horrible pipeline leaks. Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, the pipeline leaks. Pipeline leaks is the reason why, like, hydrogen, or we're using methane, or natural gas, it can all be pretty sketch, which is just fuel in general can leak, which is problematic, which is why if you can electrify it, that would be better. So, fair enough.
Your forward plans, like what scale are you going to reach and when?
We're essentially scaling up tenfold every 12 to 18 months. So this is going to make over 1,000 bricks per day. And so the next scale up in 18 months after that is looking at 10,000 bricks per day, and then 100,000 a year after that. Right. Things are scaling really quickly. We've got 20 gigawatt hours of interest in the pipeline, and we're scaling in order to meet that demand.
So thank you for that tour. I need to give a big thanks to MGA Thermal for allowing me inside to see all their equipment and how their pilot line is coming together, plus some of their research facilities, and explaining how this all works. One of the interesting things about this technology is the scale. It's quite cheap, the materials involved, and so you can imagine that you can make many megawatt hours or gigawatt hours potentially of energy storage in this way. You can use recycled materials and you can recycle it again at the end, and hopefully, I mean, according to them, at least, this is going to be a cheaper way to get this like real bulk energy storage. Their scale-up plans are quite aggressive, and they've got quite a lot of projects in the pipeline. So I think this is going to be a really interesting one to watch over the next few years and see how it plays out, see how the costs of all the competing technology end up going, to see what kind of contribution technology like MGA can make within the broader context of energy storage and, renewable electricity system in general. Thanks a lot to MGA for the tour. And as always, big thank you to the Engineering with Rosie Patreon team. If you'd like to join us, there's a link in the description. And thanks to you all for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
Coolio Doolio. I'll go back to me. Me. I can properly put my mic down. There we go. And they're already also using bio natural gas as a way to try to increase herd size. This big dairy made a bio natural gas pipeline, and 2 days after opening it, it went into the river that had been restocked with endangered fish. Lovely. Okay, so yeah, maybe that's not the right way to go then. Yeah, fuel, anything that's like chemical, like free-flowing chemicals and fuel is tricky because the leaking is real, which is another argument for, moving towards electrification and clean energy, and also projection whenever you hear something really weird like, the batteries are leaking lithium into the waterways, which I have heard before. And it's not true. If anything, it's electrolyte due to degrading batteries from insufficient storage mechanisms, from them being too hot or something like that. So that's more protection. The advantage here is you capture energy and store it. The use to sorry. The advantage here is you capture energy and store it. The use to use it later when needed. Exactly. So it's just it helps for the times when there's less energy production because there's no sun or there's no wind, right? Damn, pipelines are such an issue. Yes, which is why absolutely any form of new fuel, new forms of energy production that involves pipelines makes me nervous, including carbon capture and storage, because if we are relying on transporting all of that lovely greenhouse gases to a location to get stored, you will have to worry about leaking as well. What else can they do though? Convert it to something on site and flare it or something? I mean, obviously, the less transport required, the less likely it's going to leak. So that will be better. But yeah, I don't know. Honestly, they need to have less cows for one thing. I think the industry just needs to shrink for one thing. But that is a controversial take because, yeah, people in agriculture don't want to hear anything of that sort, which is challenging. They're one of the most successful sectors at avoiding any change when it comes to how little agriculture emissions have gone down compared to all the other sectors. But anyways, so those are the topics that I think I'm going to leave us with today. I mean, CO2 is not great at volume, but it's already present in air, so CO2 pipeline a lot safer perhaps. I don't want it bubbling through water and acidifying it or whatever. True. CO2, what are the impacts of leaking CO2? Because there actually are impacts. Let's see. So there was an occasion in September where a carbon dioxide pipeline burst in Mississippi. Oh, that happened 2 years ago, actually. So basically, rain caused the pipe to slide down and then releasing ice and CO2. And then the plume of CO2 rolled down to a village of 50 people. Emergency personnel evacuated about 200 residents from there and the surrounding area, and 45 people sought medical attention, according to an investigation by the U.S. Department of Transport's Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration. There were no deaths. I want to know what the health impacts were, though. Why did they need to be evacuated? I think it's people have trouble breathing when there's too much CO2 because it enters your airways faster than the oxygen can, so it can be difficult for people to breathe if there's a huge influx of CO2 through a pipeline leak. Yeah, a lot of agriculture is really good at lobbying. I believe there's also heat and electricity direct through something like silicon technology. Too many problems aside, just from environmental on 800 head farms, in my personal experience, seems to have a strong lobby in Germany, reactionary agriculture, climate change with CO2 back in the atmosphere. I mean, obviously it's going to cause climate change as well, but I think it also does cause environmental impacts as well from leaking pipelines. Yeah, agriculture in Europe is a powerful lobby, gets loads of money and special exceptions. Yeah, you can't breathe and it's denser than oxygen. Exactly, yes. Did you have a chance to read that story I did on produced water spills? Did you post it somewhere? If the air is flooded with CO2, there is no oxygen to breathe. Yes. So that's the reason why it can be dangerous, even though CO2 is naturally occurring in the environment. Anything with a high density of a certain item can be very dangerous, including water. Just thought of that because of the thing about leaking batteries. The broader issue is deteriorating infrastructure, which also applies to CO2 methane leaks. Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, if you want, you can send it to me. I'd be willing to go until 1, and we can make that be our final thingamajig. It's interesting that they paired it with ice, probably to make the CO2 more dense, I guess, for transport. Oh, it's in Discord. Let me check. Is it in general or news? I don't think I see it. Thank you. Oh, is it in your Discord or is it in my Discord? Because I don't think I've joined your Discord yet. I need to. Thank you. Here we go. Wait, if I listen to it, is it going to be your voice? There are volcanoes in Africa that put out CO2 and kill whole villages. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, you put it in there too now. Thank you. Wait, if I listen to it, is it your voice or no? Because I'm definitely going to listen to it if it's your voice. It is? Oh, we got to listen then. Oil and gas wastewater spills in the Pisciance Basin top 700,000 gallons in 2019. That sucks. That's bad. No bueno. Oh, this is when you were the news director. You're so cool. That's awesome. Okay, we're going to listen to Levelhead. I don't think I've ever heard you talk in a non-sarcastic tone. So if this is going to be like straight line non-sarcastic, that's going to be very entertaining for me.
For oil and gas industry advocates on Colorado's western slope, it's well known that business just ain't what it used to be.
Just the entire oil and gas economy in the western slope has really taken a big hit.
That's Brian Gallagher, principal for a small investment group focused on industrial water and sustainability. Gallagher is also a process engineer who has developed treatment methods for industrial water. Despite the decline in oil and gas production, he says that even until 2019, he was involved in providing wastewater treatment services in Rifle, a town that sits at the center of a once booming natural gas industry. Downturn or not, the after effects of the previous boom are still clear to see.
It is.
Spent some time driving around western Garfield County, and it's hard to miss the steel tanks, usually in sets of 2 or more, many of which act as temporary storage for water that flows back to the surface as a byproduct of oil and gas production. This produced water, or wastewater, is a combination of the millions of gallons used to hydraulically fracture each well, plus water trapped in the rock formations with the oil and natural gas.
Any flowback that comes from drilling operations, it could be from an active well that's actually being developed and actively fracked, or it can be flow back from a well that's producing.
Produced water is also known as brine because it can contain large quantities of salts and minerals. Volatile organic compounds like benzene, naturally occurring radioactive materials, and many other unknown chemical additives can also be found in the water.
It's heavily regulated in terms of that you can't just dump it on the ground. It can't go into the rivers. It's a difficult thing to dispose of. There's a significant volume of it. So in order to make money, you need to do something with this waste product. And whether that's injection or treatment, it's a significant expense and a huge hassle.
The COGCC's production database shows that in 2019, operators in the state of Colorado reported producing over 26 billion gallons of wastewater, enough to fill more than 40,000 Olympic swimming pools. At least 40% of that water was produced in Rio Blanco and Garfield counties. Keeping all that water contained and out of the environment prior to disposal or treatment poses a huge challenge. Untreated produced water is corrosive. Combine that with high mineral contents, and over time, pipelines, tanks, pit liners, and valves degrade, resulting in frequent spills. Other contributing factors include human error, failure to follow procedures, freezing temperatures, and operators facing slim margins, employing fewer experienced workers to maintain aging equipment. In 2019, over 700,000 gallons of produced water spilled in the Piceance Basin. In many instances, spills are contained inside secondary emergency containment structures, such as piles of gravel or lined steel walls, but operators don't always get that lucky, and toxic water spills reach the soil, enter surface water, or are discovered bubbling up in the middle of a field above a buried pipeline.
Sometimes it'll be contained on top of it. Sometimes it will migrate deeper. It depends on what's down there. And they usually don't know until they start investigating after the spill.
That's Leslie Siebel, a hydrogeologist with the Colorado Geological Survey. She says even spills that impact soil can usually be cleaned up if they're spotted fast enough.
If they catch it right away, they will dig out the bulk of it. They'll just go in with excavators and dig it out, and oftentimes that material goes to a landfill then afterwards.
But not all spills are noticed right away, like one in January of 2019, where more than 100,000 gallons of produced water spilled from a ruptured pipeline less than a quarter mile from the Colorado River. 3 days later, a buried gas gathering pipeline ruptured, spilling more than 1,000 gallons of produced water and natural gas condensate that made its way to nearby Parachute Creek. Siebel explains that spills like this can contaminate ground and surface water.
If it's enough of a volume and the surface water is close enough, that's a migration pathway that you would want to consider. If it's localized and there aren't surface water bodies nearby, then you're just looking for downward migration through the soils to the water table.
One example of a high-volume spill that contaminated groundwater happened in 2016 in Rio Blanco County near Bishop Ranch on Piceance Creek. That spill resulted in a $5 million lawsuit and a major fine from the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. The spill volume is unknown, but 4 years later, crews are still trying to clean it up, with no end in sight. For KDNK News and the Rocky Mountain Community Radio Coalition, I'm Lucas Turner.
Who came not only with all the facts, but also with the photos too. I see you in the photo credits. My goodness, you did everything for this. Good for you. I mean, that's often how local journalism happens. Is you have to be a master in everything, but you're also like the badass person in charge too. Yes, that was your NPR voice. And it was great. That's a great article. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it just shows in a weird roundabout way how we actually need more workers in the fossil fuel industry, but just to clean up their messes and to like take care of infrastructure until it can be properly dismantled. So ironic. It took you a year. I can tell with all the research having to do with like all the different locations on Google Earth. Like this was a well-researched story. Look at that investigative work. Yeah, I know you want to do more reporting on this. I can feel it. I can feel it in your streams. And it's very important. Because it's definitely not talked about enough. We talk about the exploration process of fossil fuels, and we talk about the production of fossil fuels way more than we then talk about the byproduct wastewater and the and the proper closing of those plants, because most of the time people don't want to talk about the wastewater because it's not disposed of properly and to the plants, or not closed in a good way. So there are only 2 environmental regulatory people in the entire region. That is not good. So the question is, though, is that the responsibility of the companies, or should it be responsibility of the counties, of the municipalities, for them? Like, who it would be the municipalities, right? Yeah, it's crazy. It's only 2 in a region. That's ridiculous. Yeah. A lot of problems that fossil fuels have caused for us, don't you think? And you know that water could have been drinking water when it instead was turned into wastewater. Wow, that's good. Okay, all right. Get some unionization in there. It's the COGCC. Interesting. Okay. So then the question is, how can more funding go towards an increase in environmental regulatory people, right? Colorado Oil and Gas Commission. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, how do you incentivize the Colorado Oil and Gas Commission to hire more environmental regulators? Maybe there needs to be some sort of requirement set by the state on how many environmental regulators there needs to be per space or something like that. I don't know. I'm just brainstorming here. I feel like we should definitely like pair on a stream for one of these kind of things, because I would love to talk with you more about it and just like brainstorm the issues and the solutions. But you're way more knowledgeable about this kind of stuff than I am, obviously, because you're at the ground level actually like covering this stuff happening. I should have you in one of my videos. But anyways, so that being said, let me go back to me. Hi. This is gone way over noon, but I love our conversations and I love doing our deep dives. This has been a great chat. And yeah, this is basically, there's plenty of more misconceptions about emissions that I did not even get to. Let me just read off the ones that I had. We didn't even fully read all of that statement that was there in the general thing, but I think we basically got some of the main gist. If there's any others within that statement that you want me to cover in the future, let me know. You can either respond to that statement or message me privately about it. I need to get a big grant so I can cover this more in depth. Honestly, you could have your own news organization just on this topic. Make a podcast. Thank you, Miss Frizz. I hope you have a great rest of your Friday as well. Thank you so much for coming. And yes, we can definitely do a collaboration. Yeah, so there's other topics that we haven't covered, so we can always do a misconceptions part 2. I would be down. Yeah, Miss Furs is right. You are really good at covering this, and there should be money out there for you. There should be more money out here for a lot of this kind of work. Yes, Levelhead's independent climate news. But anyways, yes, thank you very much, everybody, for hanging out with me on your Friday. There are many things you can do on a Friday, so I appreciate that you were here. Definitely look for my recap video, which will be coming out tonight. So look forward to that. It's going to be designed a little differently than previous recap videos because I'm trying to do less stories, but more coverage on each story. So let me know what you think about that on Tuesday when I see you again. And until next time, remember to talk about the climate crisis